As a woman, we're told not to be aggressive. And I think it's like literally unlearning was half of the process of becoming a political artist, is unlearning what you're told you're supposed to do versus what you always want to do. And it doesn't mean everyone's political, but I think being a minority and being a female artist or being a minority in general or a marginalized group isn't a political act in and of itself to be an artist, because you're already going against the grain. You're already pushing yourself into a world that doesn't want you. Famous on Mars had already begun, and it started basically around the same time Instagram was just starting to become a thing. And I found that I was afraid of and reluctant to marry the two because I was so set on practices being separate. I had a really hard time when I first came to my master's program, coming to terms with the fact that I had two running practices that I never really allowed myself or gave myself the permission to say this can be the same thing, or I can take those aesthetics and marry them and find some way to have this vision become one. And it didn't happen until I was almost second year at SVA. Famous on Mars is primarily an interactive installation that lives online. I use social media platforms like Instagram and Facebook to get real-time feedback and a lot of interaction from other artists. When it is experienced IRL, it acts as kind of like a pop-up curation / concept store. So when you walk in, it feels a lot like what you would imagine small boutique pop-ups are. But as a person interacts and experiences it and, for lack of a better phrase, unpacks the room, they find that all of the objects have strong feminist undercurrents and political ideology behind them. I use lots of fun and colorful palettes in order to engage the audience and make it easier for you to walk in and experience it, because it seems sort of nostalgic based. There's a lot of 90s and iridescent and things like that that make it really accessible, and I want it to feel inclusive as well. I mean, we had sex toys that didn't really look like sex toys from Unbound. We had, which were pink and blue and green and teal and all these things that were very Miami and very much on that aesthetic of most of the installations for Famous on Mars. And the idea really was to get people to sort of start thinking about these things, thinking about people who make magazines like Tom Tom, which is literally a women's drum magazine. Female drummers, you're okay, that's a really small niche environment. Is it? I don't know, because they keep coming out with publications, right? So why do we think that that's so uncommon when it's clearly not? So things like that where you just sort of think, okay, someone actually made something out of this. Wow, I didn't know this existed. And that's really what I want people to have, is to feel that whatever they're touching, experiencing is as important as them experiencing it. Collaborating with other people is a big part of my process. I don't like to be the only curator. I just like to instill some sort of cohesiveness and allow there to be a lot of things that bubble to the surface based on what other people are trying to bring to the table. And I think meeting new artists is a huge part of it, and then also helping people who come into the space sort of see something or experience something they haven't had before. For the first one I did for Miami, the second one we weren't able to have live tattooing due to codes and things like that, state stuff. But the first one, we had a tattoo artist doing live tattooing that was a mix of NSFW to really on ankles or whatever. And we had kids walking through and adults walking through and people who have never even heard a tattoo needle before, because it's a very niche environment where if you were to see a tattoo or get a tattoo, you're a very specific demographic for the most part. So people would be drawn into the room because they're just hearing this needle going. They're like, what the heck is this? And everything from pure curiosity and excitement to complete disgust. And I just thought, when else are they going to experience this? You have to go through certain things to even walk into a tattoo parlor. So I thought that was really nice to sort of have people have this multi-sensory experience, whether they wanted it or not. So I can go there and sit in on summits, especially for women's rights and arts and things like that, and say, hey, Peace Building Solution cares and we're here, we want to hear what you're doing. And actually that can come back in and fold into the research that we do, because what we do is basically as much research and information to create and produce more sustainability in the nonprofit sector, especially in Haiti. So most of what I'm doing with them is trying to make more art things happen here stateside and to raise funds that way. So it's been touch and go because it's really hard. Nonprofit world works very slow pace. It's like so freaking controversial to do an all-women show, you know? Everyone's just like, okay, well that's like you saying, we're definitely not equal. So now you have to take out all this time to like say these are all women. You know, and people feel really upset about that because there's like both sides of feminism of saying, of course we're equal, why do you act like we're not? And the other one's being like, have you noticed everything yet? Why aren't you paying attention? Because we're not. You know, and I think that the moment we stop having female quoted or like branded art shows is the day that maybe we are equal, because there's an urgency and there's a reason behind that. If you say, this is a queer show, you're saying, I want you to know that everyone in this show is queer because it's underrepresented. We're creating a platform, we're making it a point. And if you have to make a point about it, it's because there isn't enough of it. And if it's a niche and people are like so sick of it, well, think about why people feel like it's still important. You know, it's one of these things where people get sick of feminism, people get sick of politics and politic-driven art over time because they just feel like it's so inundated in it and everyone's doing it. But those never stop being important topics. Yeah, you have to be, because you're constantly like opening a wound to the world. You know, you're like, okay, so this is my soft underbelly. This is like me at my most vulnerable. Please don't massacre me. You know, but it's the difficulty of it is art is so personal and taste. There's no count for taste. You know, people are going to love you, they're going to hate you, they're going to feel nothing, which is the worst case scenario, is if you elicit absolutely nothing. You have to be fearless to make artwork because it's not easy. I'm doing Miami again for Satellite, but this year I'm also sponsorship and partnership liaison. So if people are interested in sponsoring, want to come in as fiscal, or they want to do special events in partnership, or they want to be part of the, we're going to have talks this year. So those are all options for people to come in on.
Well, lastly, just say like your name, or you can say I'm famous on Mars and I'm living life fearless.
Hi, I'm AnnaLiisa. I'm famous on Mars and I'm living life fearless.